On today's Film Friday, we're taking a look at the new Holga 135HC half-frame film camera. Hey everyone, Sean here with Film Friday, and happy Holga Week. Holga Week is the first week of October. We're right in the middle of it, and Holga Week is a time to celebrate all things Holga film cameras. As you can see, I've got two Holgas right here. Basically, you can take pictures during this week, submit them to a contest, and you might win a cool prize. If you'd like to learn more about Holga Week, go to holgaweek.com or just click the link in the video description. So to celebrate Holga Week, we're taking a look at this brand new Holga half-frame camera. This is the Holga 135HC. Now this camera is pretty much identical to the Holga 135, which I have right here. This camera is just your standard 35mm point-and-shoot film camera. It's got a couple functions. You can change your focus a little, change your aperture slightly. You can also shoot bulb mode. These are great cameras for people who want to get into Holga, but don't really want to shoot medium format film. The lo-fi lens on the front gives you a very Holga style feel. So they're a great option for 35mm photographers who want to dip their feet into Holga. And as of last winter, Holga has made a new version of this camera, the 135HC, which is a half-frame film camera. And basically what a half-frame film camera is it takes half a frame of 35mm film. So if you put a roll of 24 exposures in this camera, you're going to get 48 exposures. It's going to double how many photos you can take, but each one of those photos will be half the size. Half-frame photography is super economical because you take more photos on less film, saving you a couple bucks. Now the photos will be slightly lower resolution, but if you're shooting with a Holga camera, that doesn't really matter because you're kind of going for that lo-fi look anyway. Now, like I said, this camera is basically just a slightly modified version of this camera. And the only thing they really modified is they changed the winder, which means it only cranks half of the film through for each shot. They also made the film counter go up to a larger number to account for the larger number of photos you're going to be taking. And they were also supposed to put a half-frame film mask in their camera. Now, unfortunately, the first Holga 135HC that I purchased, this one right here, I purchased this last winter when these first were listed on bnh.com. Unfortunately, this one did not have the half frame mask. It's not a half frame, it is a full frame mask. So that means every photo I took with this camera, every half frame shot, was actually a double exposure over the last shot. So it's basically like taking a bunch of full frame shots and kind of merging them onto each other. Now, fortunately, a user who purchased one reached out to me on YouTube and told me, hey, guess what? They now have the mask in them. And sure enough, I'll show you with this new one I purchased. There you go, half frame mask. I've always loved lo-fi half frame photography. Back in the day, I purchased this little guy. This is a Superheads Golden half frame camera. Super compact, doesn't have many controls. You can basically do cloudy, sunny, or flash. The focus is fixed, but I did love this guy. It does have a very soft lens, but it was a fun little camera to shoot with. And then more recently, when the Ektar H35 came out, when Kodak came out with this little guy, I shot with this, enjoyed this as well. Pretty much a fixed focus, and then I can either use no flash or flash. So not a lot of options. So what I really like about the Holga 135HC is it gives you more options. You have focus, the classic Holga focus, so mountain, a large group of people, a smaller group of people, and then one person. Then of course I can also choose sunny or cloudy. That changes the aperture slightly. And then what I really like about this camera is it has a bulb mode. So if I'm in really dark situation, if it's super dark, I can put this on a tripod and I can do a long exposure shot. So with this camera, I'm getting that fun lo-fi half-frame photography, but I have a lot more options for adjusting the focus and exposure than I do with these other half-frame lo-fi cameras. Here's some photos I captured with the Holga 135HC and some Fujifilm Fujicolor 235mm film. And one of the fun things about half-frame is you can scan both frames as a single full frame, so you can kind of tell a story. You can show one element and then show another element of the same scene. You can also crop to each frame individually, which I did for a couple of these shots. I really like the detail on this water pump. Again, having that focus control in this camera is really nice. Now, one of the problems you will run into when you're scanning 2 frames at once, the scanner is going to kind of pick one value. So you will have one shot that's a little overexposed and one that's a little underexposed. You can always edit this in Photoshop, but it can be a bit of a pain. I shot these photos in early October, and it was fun to capture the contrast between the trees that are still green and the trees that are starting to change color. And sometimes when you're shooting half frame, you will get an interesting combination of images like this closed sign and a tree. I'm not really sure what these have to do in common, but they do kind of work color-wise, and it was kind of fun to scan them and put them together. You can also capture a subject kind of farther away and then do a close-up detail shot. That's another great use of half frame if you're going to scan both frames at once. Now, this is a Holga camera with a Holga lens, so you are going to get a softer image. You're going to get some grain, and it's not going to have the highest amount of detail. But if you're going to go out and capture images where you want that look, a Holga camera is a great tool to get you there. Now, there's really only one downside to this camera that I've found so far. Sometimes when I'm advancing the film, it doesn't stop at a half frame. It actually advances a full frame, which means I lose an exposure. When I'm looking at the negative, there are actually little half frame gaps between some of my exposures. There were just a handful of times it happened. I think I may have missed 5 or 6 exposures overall, but this is a Holga camera, and Holga cameras are cheap, they are plastic, and they don't always perfectly work. I should mention for the Holga historians in the crowd, this is not the first Holga half-frame camera that Holga has made. They did have a half-frame camera before this called the Holga Tim. The Holga Tim had a face on it. One eye was one frame, one eye was the other. It was a very unique setup. It was using 2 smaller lenses. This is just your standard Holga 135, but it's got the half-frame mask. So I think this is a better design overall than the Tim, but I do want to buy one of those Tims because I think they look really funny and I gotta add it to my collection. I have to have all the Holgas in the world. Shooting with this camera really reminded me why I love half frame photography so much. And with all the extra controls to kind of fine tune my focus and exposure, I'm really enjoying this camera. I am probably gonna shoot a lot more with this. And in some ways, I think I like it even more than my original Holga 135 camera. I'm getting double the exposures. I'm getting that fun half frame thing where I can put 2 similar subjects together in a full frame. So all that to say, I really like this camera and I definitely recommend it. If you are a Holga camera collector, you should definitely get one of these. Thanks for watching today's video, and don't forget, it is Holga Week. You got a couple more days, so if you want to get involved, go to holgaweek.com or click the link in the description below. Also, while you're at it, click right here to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can see more fun Film Friday videos like this in the future, plus some of the interesting short films that I make. I recently made a short film about a mammoth. You should check it out.